The capital was burning before the Queen realized her fleet had stopped answering. At first, it was only silence. The great holographic display above the throne showed hundreds of friendly ships in orbit. Then one icon blinked out. Then another. Then 5 at once. No distress call. No warning. They were simply gone. Queen Valyra stood slowly from her throne. "Report," she said. No one answered. The palace shook. Dust fell from the high ceiling. Far below, fire rolled across the outer districts of the capital city. Towers that had stood for centuries cracked and fell. The sky, once bright with shield light, flickered and then shattered like broken glass. The orbital shields failed completely. Enemy artillery struck the surface with cold precision. Not wild, not angry, just calculated. The empire that had ruled 3 sectors for 300 years was collapsing in less than 6 hours. Inside the throne chamber, Queen Valyra stood alone. Except she wasn't. At the base of her shattered dais stood one human soldier, Captain Adrian Cross. His armor was burned along one side. His helmet visor was cracked, but still glowing faint blue. He held his rifle steady, not aiming, not lowering it. He was still. Every other Allied force had withdrawn. The coalition fleets had jumped out of the system. The Queen's own outer defenses had gone silent. The Royal Guard units were pulling back to protect the surviving noble families. Only the human remained. A Royal Guard commander rushed into the chamber, breathing hard. "Your Majesty," he said, kneeling, "the coalition has broken formation. They claim they cannot hold orbit. They are retreating." "Retreating?" the Queen asked quietly. "Yes." Another explosion shook the palace. The floor trembled under their feet. The commander glanced at the human. "Earth Command has ordered full withdrawal. Their ships are leaving." A faint light flickered inside Adrian's helmet. He had received the same order. A calm voice spoke directly into his neural link. "All human personnel withdraw immediately. The capital is lost. Repeat, withdraw." He listened. He did not react. The Queen stepped down from her throne. Her long robes brushed over cracked marble tiles. Outside the high windows, smoke covered the skyline. "They promise mutual defense," she said. "They promise survival," the commander replied carefully. The truth was simple. The coalition had decided the empire was no longer worth saving. More alarms echoed through the chamber. Emergency lights glowed red along the walls. Evacuation ships launched from distant platforms. The noble houses were fleeing. Transports filled the sky like sparks rising from fire. None came for the Queen. Adrian lifted a hand to his helmet. He paused the transmission from Earth. Then he turned it off. The Royal Guard commander stared at him. "Captain, your extraction window closes in 3 minutes." Adrian did not move. "Yes," he said calmly. "You will be stranded." He gave no answer. Another impact struck closer. A side corridor collapsed. Stone and metal screamed under pressure. The commander turned back to the Queen. "Majesty, we must move. There are tunnels beneath the palace. We can still reach the mountain stronghold." Queen Valyra looked around her throne room. The banners of conquered systems hung torn and blackened. The great mosaic floor was cracked by shock waves. "If I run," she said softly, "my people will know." "They already know," the commander replied. A new signal cut through the room. It was not friendly. Enemy command. "Surrender and orbital bombardment will cease," the cold voice announced. "Refusal will result in total palace destruction." The message ended. Silence followed. The commander swallowed. "Majesty." The palace doors at the far end of the chamber glowed faint orange. Heat lines appeared along the edges. The enemy had begun breaching. The Queen's shoulders straightened. She had ruled through strength her entire life. She had never imagined watching her empire fall from her own throne room. She turned to the human. "You are free to go, human," she said. It was not an order. It was permission. The metal of the doors began to melt. Liquid fire dripped to the floor. The commander backed toward a hidden passage. "Majesty, please." She did not move. Adrian adjusted his grip on his rifle. He tapped the control on his wrist. Palace defense drones, long unused, activated in hidden alcoves. Interior blast doors sealed deeper in the corridor, forcing any attackers to enter through the main breach. He stepped forward slightly, placing himself between the Queen and the doors. "I wasn't stationed here for the Empire," he replied calmly. The doors exploded inward. Smoke and molten fragments filled the air. Through the burning gap, armored enemy soldiers advanced in tight formation. Their weapons were raised. Their movements were steady and confident. Behind him, the last ruler of a dying empire stood, without a throne. In front of her, one human soldier stood his ground, and he did not retreat. Smoke filled the throne chamber, but Captain Adrian Cross did not rush forward. He stepped back instead. "Your Majesty," he said calmly, "move behind the second pillar. Stay low." Queen Vaelira did not argue. She moved where he told her. It felt strange to take orders inside her own throne room. The first wave of enemy soldiers entered through the broken doors. Their armor was dark and heavy. Their movements were careful. They expected chaos. They did not expect control. Adrian tapped his wrist console. Hidden panels in the walls slid open. Old palace security drones powered on with sharp mechanical sounds. Their red optics blinked alive. He sealed 3 corridor doors at once. Heavy blast panels dropped from the ceiling behind the invading troops, cutting off their retreat. The enemy hesitated. Adrian fired once. Not wildly, not in panic. One precise shot. The lead attacker fell. The drones moved in perfect pattern, targeting joints and armor, pushing the soldiers back toward the center breach. The palace architecture worked like a funnel, narrowing their path. More enemies tried to flank through side halls. Adrian sealed those too. The throne wing became a controlled battlefield. The Queen watched from behind a pillar, her breathing slow but steady. For centuries, her empire had ruled through fear and visible power. Her fleets had crushed rebellion with overwhelming force. This was different. The human did not roar or shout. He did not charge. He calculated. A second wave entered. Adrian stepped to a new angle, forcing them into crossfire with his drones. He used broken columns as cover. He advanced only when the ground was clear. Within minutes, the polished marble floor was covered in silent armored forms. The Royal Guard commander had retreated through hidden tunnels to escort surviving nobles. Only the Queen and the human remained in the throne wing. More alarms sounded. Multiple contact approaching from the western gallery. Adrian said quietly, reading the palace map in his visor. He rerouted power from ceremonial lighting to defensive grids. Energy barriers flickered to life across narrow corridors. The attackers were forced into tighter spaces. Another controlled exchange of fire. Another wave stopped. The Queen stepped closer behind him. "You fight as if this palace belongs to you," she said. "It's defensible," he replied. "That's enough." Outside, the city continued to burn. More enemy forces advanced. Adrian retreated step by step, drawing them deeper into the wing. Each corridor became a trap. Each staircase narrowed their advantage. He used the height of the throne platform to gain sight lines. He moved like he had studied the palace for years. In truth, he had, between rotations, he had memorized structural layouts, emergency systems, old defense protocols forgotten by the Queen's own engineers. He had prepared. Another explosion shook the structure. A section of the ceiling collapsed near the entrance. Firelight spilled into the chamber. The Queen stared at him. "Your fleet is gone. Your allies fled. Why do you remain?" He fired twice more before answering. "Because retreat is strategic," he said evenly. "Abandonment is not." She absorbed the words in silence. More enemy troops poured into the outer corridors. Adrian's drone count dropped. Ammunition levels declined steadily. "You owe my empire nothing," she said. "Our treaty was political." He paused just long enough to glance at her. "I wasn't sent here as a diplomat," he said. She frowned. "You were introduced as a military envoy. I volunteered for this post." That made her still. "Volunteered," she repeated. "Yes." "For what purpose?" He sealed another corridor and repositioned. to study your defense systems, to build contingencies, to be here if something like this happened. Her eyes widened slightly. You expected betrayal. I expect variables, he replied. Another blast rocked the palace. The outer walls trembled. Dust fell from above. Suddenly, all enemy troops in the corridor pulled back. Adrian noticed first. They're retreating from interior positions, he said quietly. The queen stepped closer to the broken doorway and looked toward the burning sky. A new transmission filled the chamber. It was enemy command again, louder now, more direct. Orbital bombardment authorized. Palace coordinates locked. Surface eradication in 5 minutes. The words echoed through the ruined hall. Even Adrian froze for half a second. The queen's voice lowered. They will destroy the entire structure. Yes. Even with their own troops inside? Yes. Silence followed. Outside, distant engines roared as massive warships repositioned above the atmosphere. The human checked his remaining drone count. Minimal. Ammunition. Low. Evacuation options. None. The queen looked at him carefully. You can still run, she said. There may be time to reach the lower tunnels. He shook his head once. If they fire from orbit, tunnels won't matter. The palace groaned under structural strain. Cracks spread across the walls like dark veins. Then why stay? She asked quietly. He did not answer right away. He looked up at the sky through the broken ceiling. They think removing the throne ends the system, he said. They think fear finishes what force starts. The countdown from the enemy fleet began to broadcast across all frequencies. For minutes, the queen stood straight despite the shaking ground. My empire is already lost, she said. Adrian's visor glowed faintly. Empires fall, he replied. People don't have to. High above the planet, weapons charged, and inside the collapsing throne wing, one human soldier began activating something the enemy did not know existed. The countdown echoed to the ruined throne chamber. 3 minutes. Outside, the sky burned with the glow of charging orbital weapons. The enemy fleet had moved into perfect firing formation. Their ships hung like dark shapes above the clouds, silent and certain. Queen Valyra stood still, watching the broken ceiling where stars flickered between smoke. Is this how your species ends wars? She asked quietly. Adrian did not answer. He knelt beside a fractured section of the marble floor and pressed his palm against a hidden access plate. A faint blue ring appeared beneath his glove. Code streamed across his visor. This was never about ending a war, he said calmly. It was about surviving one. 2 minutes. Deep beneath the capital, systems that had been sleeping for months began to wake. Power nodes hidden inside public transit hubs activated. Energy relays buried within water purification plants shifted into new patterns. Structural reinforcements inside skyscrapers began to hum softly. All of it had been installed quietly, labeled as infrastructure upgrades, efficiency improvements, disaster recovery enhancements. No one had questioned it. Human engineers had worked with precision and patience, always smiling, always helpful. The queen stared at him. What are you doing? Contingency protocol, he replied. For what? For betrayal. Above the atmosphere, the first orbital strike fired. A beam of white light tore down through the clouds toward the palace. The queen closed her eyes. Impact came, and then something impossible happened. The beam struck the capital, but instead of exploding, it bent. Light curved outward like water hitting invisible glass. A massive ripple spread across the skyline. A faint blue shimmer appeared in the air above the city. A shield, not the old imperial shield that had failed hours ago. Something deeper, stronger. The second strike followed, then a third. Each one struck the same invisible barrier and scattered harmlessly into the upper atmosphere. The palace trembled, but it did not break. The queen opened her eyes slowly. Across the city, a dome of faint blue energy shimmered into full visibility, stretching far beyond the capital's borders. What is this? She whispered. A gravitic reinforcement grid, Adrian answered. Layered field distortion. It spreads impact force across multiple anchor points. She stared at him. You built this? Earth built it. When? Over the last 7 months. Her expression hardened with disbelief. Your fleet only arrived 8 months ago. Yes. Another orbital blast struck. Again, it dissolved across the shield. High above, the enemy fleet hesitated. They had expected fire. They had expected ruin. They had not expected resistance. Inside their command decks, officers began shouting. Energy readings spiked across their sensors. Unknown gravitational distortions surrounded the capital. Adrian stood slowly. The upgrades to your infrastructure, he said. They weren't just repairs. You hid this inside my own systems, she said. We prepared quietly. The Queen looked out across her protected city. Fires still burned in outer districts, but the heart of the capital stood beneath a silent dome of human engineering. For centuries, she said softly, we ruled through visible power. Fleets, armies, displays of strength. Adrian nodded once. Humans prepare in silence. In orbit, enemy warships began to reposition again. Some attempted to increase output. Others pulled back to avoid feedback interference from the shield. Then new signals appeared on long-range scanners. At first, the enemy thought it was debris. Then the shapes resolved into organized formations, human fleet signatures, not retreating, not fleeing, repositioned beyond the system's edge during withdrawal, now returning. But they did not rush forward in attack formation. They spread out across the system's perimeter instead, blocking escape routes, stabilizing gravitational lanes, cutting off reinforcement paths. The Queen's eyes widened as new tactical displays activated in the throne chamber. You never abandoned the system, she realized. We relocated, Adrian said calmly. On the enemy flagship, alarm signals escalated. Their bombardment had failed. Their surprise attack had not broken the capital. Now human fleets were reappearing in disciplined formations at the system's boundary. Not aggressive, controlled, precise. The capital's shield stabilized fully. Energy readings balanced across thousands of hidden anchor points beneath the city. The Queen looked at the human soldier differently now. You knew this might happen. I knew it was possible. And you said nothing. We don't announce preparation, he replied. It defeats the purpose. High above, the enemy fleet paused all bombardment attempts. Then a new transmission cut through every channel. Immediate surrender requested from Queen Veilira. Failure to comply will result in full system escalation. The words carried tension now, not confidence. Inside the throne chamber, smoke still drifted through broken walls. The floor was cracked. The doors were melted ruins. But the capital still stood. The Queen stepped forward. Before she could speak, Adrian moved. He walked past her slowly and stood at the edge of the shattered doorway, looking up at the sky where enemy ships hovered in uncertain formation. He opened a secure channel. This is Captain Adrian Cross. He said evenly, You miscalculated. The enemy flagship went silent for a fraction of a second, and the human fleet tightened its formation at the edge of the stars. The throne chamber was still cracked and burning in places, but the sky above the capital had grown quiet. The enemy fleet remained in orbit, uncertain now. Their bombardment had failed. The human fleet had returned. The balance of power had shifted. Captain Adrian Cross stood at the broken edge of the palace entrance and opened a direct channel. His voice carried across every major frequency in the system. You mistook loyalty for weakness. There was no anger in his tone, no threat, only calm certainty. On the enemy flagship, commanders watched tactical projections change in real time. Human ships were not charging forward. They were positioning with careful precision, forming a wide containment arc around the system. Then the first disruption began. It did not look dramatic. One enemy command cruiser suddenly lost weapons control. Its primary cannons powered down without firing. Control systems flickered, then locked. Another ship's propulsion failed. Engines froze mid-charge, unable to initiate faster-than-light escape. A third vessel's internal communications scrambled. Command signals failed to reach subordinate ships. Targeted system disruptions. No explosions. No firestorms. just precision interference. The Queen watched the sky through the shattered ceiling as icons on her restored tactical display changed from red to gray. "What are they doing?" she asked quietly. "Removing their options," Adrian replied. Human cyber warfare units had already infiltrated the enemy network during the initial assault. When the coalition betrayed the Empire, Earth had repositioned, not retreated. Now those quiet preparations activated fully. Weapon systems across the enemy fleet powered down one by one. Missile bays locked. Energy cores throttled to minimum output. Shield harmonics destabilized without failing completely, enough to prevent counterattack. Propulsion drives froze under coordinated gravitic interference. The enemy ships were not destroyed. They were simply neutralized. On the flagship, panic spread. Orders were shouted. Backup systems were attempted. Manual overrides engaged. Nothing worked. The human fleet had not fired a single visible shot, and yet the enemy armada was helpless. The Queen's hands tightened at her sides. For centuries, her empire had displayed power through spectacle, massive fleets, loud victories, public executions of rebellion. This was different. This was controlled inevitability. A final transmission from Adrian went out across the system. "You can withdraw," he said, "or you can remain here without weapons, without engines, and without command." There was a long pause. Enemy vessels began slowly restoring minimal propulsion, enough to drift backward. One by one, disabled command ships were allowed partial system recovery under strict monitoring. They turned away from the capital. No pursuit followed. No revenge strike. The human fleet maintained position until the last hostile vessel cleared the outer boundary of the system. Then silence returned to space. Below, the shield over the capital dimmed but remained active. Fires still burned in outer districts. Entire sectors of the city were damaged. The palace itself stood broken and blackened, but it still stood. Queen Valara walked slowly to the edge of the ruined chamber. She looked out over her wounded capital. Smoke rising, emergency lights blinking, rescue craft moving between towers. Her empire was shattered, but her people were alive. She turned toward the human soldier. "You could have destroyed them," she said. "Yes." "You chose not to." "Yes." She studied him carefully. "Why protect us?" Adrian removed his helmet. His face was calm, marked with dirt and small cuts from falling debris. "Because rebuilding is harder than conquering," he said simply. She looked back toward the skyline. "For centuries, we believed strength meant domination," she admitted. "Strength is control," he replied. "Destruction is easy." The royal guard began to re-enter the throne wing cautiously, shocked to see the capital still intact. Messages flooded in from across the planet. Reports of survival, confirmation that orbital strikes had ceased. The Queen straightened her posture. Her throne was cracked. Her banners burned. Her fleets were gone. But her civilization remained. And that meant choice. She could rebuild through fear again. Or she could learn. Far above, the human fleet remained at the system's edge, not claiming territory, not demanding tribute, not occupying orbit, simply present, steady. The Queen looked at Adrian once more. "You stood alone when my empire fell," she said. He shook his head slightly. "I was never alone." She followed his gaze upward toward the silent stars where human ships held formation. For the first time since the attack began, she felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not pride, respect. The enemy had withdrawn. The capital still breathed. And the empire now faced a different kind of decision, one that would shape its future more than any war ever had. Months passed. The fires were gone. The capital still carried scars, but cranes now rose where towers had fallen. Construction platforms floated between damaged buildings. Repair drones moved in quiet lines across the skyline. The shield grid, once invisible, remained active in low-power mode, woven into the city like a silent guardian. Reconstruction had begun. Human engineers worked beside Imperial crews without banners, without speeches, without demands. They repaired transit systems, reinforced energy grids, and strengthened orbital defenses. New foundations were laid deeper and stronger than before. Surviving nobles watched carefully. They expected Earth to claim control. They expected a price. A fleet that could disable an entire armada without firing a visible shot did not act from weakness. It acted from strength. And strength, in their history, always demanded tribute. But no claim came. No territory was taken. No governor appointed. Earth refused. When questioned through diplomatic channels, the response was simple. Stability benefits all. The words unsettled many in the court. They were used to power that demanded submission. This power did not. Queen Valyra stood on the rebuilt balcony of the palace months later. The throne chamber had been restored, though she had ordered the cracked marble from the day of the attack preserved beneath clear glass. A reminder. Below her, thousands gathered in the capital square. Citizens who had survived bombardment. Soldiers who had returned from lost fleets. Workers who had rebuilt their own streets. Human officers stood among imperial guards, not apart from them. The queen stepped forward to speak. Her voice carried across the plaza and into every city across the planet. Our empire fell because we believed strength meant standing alone, she said. Silence followed. We believed dominance ensured loyalty. We believed fear ensured obedience. She paused. We were wrong. The crowd listened without movement. On the day our fleets vanished and our allies fled, one soldier remained. Not because of politics, not because of treaties, but because loyalty is not weakness. Her eyes lifted toward the human delegation. From this day forward, our doctrine changes. We do not rebuild through fear. We rebuild through alliance. The word spread quickly across the empire systems. Strength through alliance. It became more than a speech. It became policy. Joint defense councils were formed. Infrastructure upgrades were expanded beyond the capital. Military reforms began, modeled not on spectacle, but on preparation. Adrian Cross watched from the edge of the balcony. His armor was repaired now, his visor replaced. He looked like any other human officer. He had already submitted his departure request. A shuttle waited in orbit after the address ended. The queen approached him privately in the restored throne chamber. The banners had been replaced, the ceiling repaired, the walls polished, but the memory of smoke still lingered. You leave tomorrow, she said. Yes. You could remain, she offered. I can grant you rank within our command structure, land, honor, a permanent place at my side. He listened respectfully. For a moment, the chamber was quiet. I was assigned to guard a throne, he said finally. She studied him. Waiting, you still have one. There was no pride in his voice, no claim of ownership, only simple truth. She nodded slowly. You changed my empire, she said. No, he replied gently. You did. The next morning, his shuttle lifted from the capital's primary platform. Citizens watched from below, not cheering wildly, not in spectacle, just standing. The human fleet that had once repositioned in silence now maintained open patrol lanes alongside Imperial vessels. Weeks later, a new document was signed within the rebuilt Council Hall, a joint human-alien defense pact. It did not bind through control. It bound through shared preparation and mutual defense. In military academies across the Empire, a new course was introduced. Its title was simple: Human Strategic Loyalty Doctrine. Cadets studied the day the throne fell, not as a story of destruction, but as a lesson in discipline, in preparation, in restraint. They studied how power could be used without spectacle, how strength could protect instead of dominate. At sunset, months after the invasion, the capital skyline shone again. New towers rose beside preserved ruins. The shield grid hummed softly in the upper air. Queen Valyra stood once more at her balcony. Her empire had fallen in a single day, but it had not ended. Far beyond the atmosphere, a single human patrol ship passed quietly through the system before moving on to its next assignment. The queen watched it disappear into stars. Her empire fell in a single day, but the human who refused to leave ensured it would rise again.